Hi, and welcome to another episode of Wine and Wisdom. I'm Thomas Le Hoang, and you're listening to the TL podcast, where knowledge is shared and no one takes themselves too seriously.
We used to get the casks of Spumante and Fruity Lexia and Dry White. Dry White was a favourite of the bums in Gosford.
$12 for 4 litres. That was a bargain.
Bargain, mate. You attach it. You play spin the cask on your Hills hoist, mate. You attach it to one side and you all stand around and you got a skull. You had to have a 10-second skull if it stopped on you.
Yeah.
Those are the days of our lives. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, mate.
Fantastic.
Ladies and gents.
Howdy, guys. How are we?
Very good.
Well, your energy seems a bit low.
Me?
What's going on? You're stressing.
Oh, I'm a little bit flustered.
Is
No.
it?
Flustered.
No, I'm all good. You know, technology. It just
She's
sometimes.
under pressure early. She's under pressure early. It's not going to go well today.
works when you
That's
want
farm life for you, Lou. That's farm life. So you buy
No,
acreage, you
it's
get
farm
no
life.
reception.
it to. Well, actually, I can only get satellite NBN, which I tell you is a piece of crap. It's no good. It's
What
no
is it? Sapphire, MBN.
Satellite
Yeah.
NBN.
Oh.
So I've got like a complete brand new subdivision across the road from me with 1 billion houses in it. And yet I'm across the road, can only get satellite and they can get normal. And I don't understand. But anyway, I'm here and that's all that matters. I
Well,
made
You
Awesome.
paid for it, you haven't. And stop comparing yourself.
Can we just drink first, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's meant to be a wine podcast.
Come on, man.
All right, so I've gone a new Chardonnay for me, a Forster Estate 2020 Chardonnay from Margaret River. I think the one I actually sent in was a 2018 by mistake, but it's the same rating. So whatever the rating was, it's Margaret River. You spoke about Margaret River last week, TL.
Yeah.
Margaret River Chardonnay, and bound to be good. So that's me.
Nice. How about you, Chris?
I bought a bottle today. The vineyard is a 1,000-year-old vineyard from the Clare Valley in Adelaide, built on ancient Roman ruins. I think it's the bottle for the Olympics because it's got lots of gold medals.
Oh, Jesus.
It's got a lot of age. It was made 5 years ago, and it's Cab Sav by Taylor's. So hopefully it'll be good.
Come on. We're here trying to teach some of our people to start enjoying wine. Come on. Don't.
The ones with the medals means it won the Olympics.
So you have a cup
And they're $6 from now.
2016, yeah.
16. Okay. And that is, what is it? Western Australia?
Yeah, South Australia, Adelaide.
Where
Just
about
outside of
that?
Adelaide. It's east of Adelaide,
Right.
back
right.
towards the Victorian border. Quite a popular wine region.
Okay.
It's good. It's a good drop for like $15, $20.
So it's a Winton Road. I don't know if you guys can see Winton Road, Barossa Valley, Cab Sav 2019. I was a bit time poor, so I had to just quickly run and grab. But I said to the guy, "Tell me something quickly that you would recommend right now." So that was it. It was an in and out in 30 seconds. But yeah, it was not too bad for what he said. Price point wise. Recommended
Three
it.
kids
Retail-
like that.
Sorry?
I had 3 kids like that.
In and out.
30 seconds.
I wish I did had 3 that way. But
This is the second time she's comparing herself.
I'm not
Stop
comparing.
comparing. I know it's a subject, but so
But
just
it's
go
a-
back a little bit. What year is it?
2019. It's a limited release. Winton Road, Vines of the Barossa. So age
Cab
12
Sav,
months.
was it?
Sorry?
Cab Sav,
Yep, Cab Sav.
a little bit young, same as mine. It's going to be a little bit young. That's all right.
Yeah, well, look, we'll see. It as
All
I
right,
said,
I've got a wine that will smash everyone this week. It's Ernest Hill, Alexander,
Alexander.
a Reserve Chardonnay
2021.
2021. For our listeners, if you go over there and you can use my membership and tell them, you should have the same discount as my membership. The reason I believe you should really look into this very quickly is that the Hunter Valley in the last 3 years have had fires, so smoke, flood, all these things happen to them. And so the 2021 was a very small vintage. They did not have enough to do. So they're going to run out of this very quickly. This is going to go out like so fast. It's not funny.
Mate, I bought 3 cases of it at the last conference, and then everyone came back to my room. Guess how much I left with?
Oh, none.
3 empty cases.
Well, some of it ended up all over Chad's car, I believe.
$30, members price. And I can tell you now, that's going to be good. And it's not that we're judging, but I'm sure this bottle will beat everyone on the video.
Yeah, that one.
Wow.
Ernest was the first winery past the Potter's Brewery in Cessnock. The first one before you get to wine country. It's on the left.
Yeah. And I discussed with them a little bit about their wine, because they could actually get grapes from here, from there, from everywhere, because they scored themselves very nicely on the Johnny Halliday. And they said, no, we don't want to do this. We still want just to stay on our reputation rather than dilute it. And this is the fantastic thing about it. And these days, even going to any place trying to get a bottle for $30 that is a nice Chardonnay, you don't find it that easily. Anyway,
So you remember there now?
Sorry?
You remember there now?
Yeah.
I think I paid $40 a bottle. 42.
Is it?
And then Kurt Bradbury drank most of it, I think. It was.
Oh, cheers, guys.
Cheers. Canillas had a go at it. He's a diabetic, so it ended up all over Chad's car, I think.
Oh, this is good. This is good. $40, not bad.
Well, so is that actually. Wow. But it's not as good as the Alexander. That's a bloody beautiful one. That was the first one we ever tried from the Hunter Valley, I think, back in the day. 2017. He says,
Yeah, actually,
I
I wouldn't go there, but it was thanks to you, Cam. That's when you took us with your team.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Good on you, mate. There you go. All right.
Yeah.
News. Little bit this week. Oh, apart from me being 100% right about the state of origin last week.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
100%.
I didn't watch it. I heard on the New South
You
Wales.
like that, Ken? There's something dribbling out of your mouth, mate.
100% right.
Points, and I just said, "Oh my God, Cam's going to be disappointed."
I've got very, very valid reasons for everything that happened. One, if you watch the first half, I was 100% right. Queensland was the better team. Two, then they had a player sent off. You mere mortals who haven't played the game wouldn't understand how hard it is to play a player down in that game, and they ran out of puff towards the end. I actually had changed my pick before the start, though, since the podcast, because I realised that New South Wales actually had 8 players from the same team in it, which I didn't pick up on straight away. So they basically had Penrith playing, and when you've got that many players in the same team in a rep thing, it's very
Unison's there.
very conducive to complementing each other. But I think I've heard a few say it, but not enough, that it was a bit of a flash in the pan thing that was brought about by Queensland losing a player. And a team of champions can always rise for one day and have a good showing. A champion team will show it consistently. Last time they played in Perth in 2020, New South Wales won by 30, and then they went to Queensland and got flogged in the decider. So we will see. But as I showed the boys, my money, my $20 hard-earned money actually went on New South Wales for the game. So I was right.
Let's
There
forget
we
it.
go, the decider.
Now let's forget.
I lost money because I trusted my friend.
There you go.
What else is making?
I could load up on the teachers again, but I'm not going to, because we've done that 100 times. But they're on strike again today, for crying out loud. My boy's missed my young bloke made his first ever school sporting team of any size, shape or description. They were supposed to play today and couldn't because the teachers needed more time off work. So thanks for that. But I thought, and obviously sensitive topic, we should talk about the the greatest country on earth, the land of the free and the home of the brave, overturning a 50-year-old law that allowed women to have a choice on whether they had a baby or not, and now making it illegal in most states. It's now you get more time in jail in some states in America for getting rid of a baby that was brought about because of a rape than you get for actually raping somebody. So
Isn't that just...
Aren't they the most moronic country on the planet of Earth? I'm glad they're our war allies because we send them in first because they're absolutely idiot. Yep. 3 weeks ago, 20 kids got shot in the classroom. They've done everything they can to keep the guns that killed them. A lady gets raped or life circumstances don't permit that they should be having a child and they don't get a choice in the matter now. I think it's disgusting, and I think it's just another example of how the greatest country on planet is absolutely effing mental.
Absolutely. It's disgusting, isn't it?
For someone not to be able to make their own decisions on their own body is just ludicrous. And that's
wasn't
on the
that
back
the same way? Isn't that the same though with the vaccine? I saw an interesting point about that. People come out and said, "Make
it's not
vaccines."
Criminal, though, is it?
Hey?
It's not criminal.
Yeah, but it's being mandated a choice against your body. So there's lots of interesting aspects to it, but they just never stop amazing me, America. God bless them.
How long can you get if you abort a baby? What's the sentence?
It depends on the states, mate, but there's life in prison for some, there's 30 years for others.
And yet there was an old American rapper who just got convicted for keeping people. Yeah, 30 years, 20 years, 50. Kelly got convicted of holding people against their will and entrapment and all this sort of stuff, like imprisoning, human trafficking, all this sort of thing, and he got 30 years.
And Ghislaine Maxwell just got 20, mate, for doing all the stuff with Jeffrey Epstein. But
there you go. So where's the continuity? Unbelievable.
And I think it's a blight, Chris, don't take this the wrong way because I don't aim it at you, but I think it's a blight on religion and the effect that religion has on a society.
Oh, I've got no question, mate. I believe you. I believe you.
The first results of the census came out this week, and that for the first time, Australia's had more people nominated as non-Christian than Christian, and I think that can only help us. I think.
What about the consensus, though? Just let's change topic here quickly. We were talking about it earlier on in the week at our seminar. The millennials have overtaken the boomers. So those born from 82, is it? 82? Is it? Like it's 29 to, what was it?
82 would make you 40, mate.
Pardon?
If you're born in 82, it'd make you 40.
Yeah, so it's up to the 39-year-olds, 39 to, 19 or something, I don't know. They're the millennials, and then the boomers after that. So we've actually, me being one of them, have overtaken that age point. So very interesting.
Because they're all dead. They're dying.
Yeah. But I mean, it's taken a long time. But thinking about it, and I was thinking back to our seminar during the week in Castle Hill there, like, it change everything though in terms of how we market, how we pitch and everything else as well. Like if you stay doing what you've always done, you're pitching to the wrong crowd, So it was just something that we took away after realizing that on Tuesday as well.
So Cam, it says here 1981 to 1996. It says, so that makes you're in it.
I am in
You're
it.
a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
Cam's racing
Majority of I still reckon the majority of homeowners are over that age. So in our business, I think we're still catering. I think staff-wise, I think employment-wise, we're catering to a different crowd. But I think actual product-wise, we're still.
Gen X, baby boomers and Gen X are you probably your biggest two sort of markets at the moment. Then millennials. But as far as size goes, I mean, population, millennials would be it. So
yeah,
they're the ones coming through. Absolutely.
So yeah, we didn't let you get a word in, mate. You got anything to say on any of that? Before we
I'm just listening to you guys. I think it's very interesting, but really, I don't care. So, I'm enjoying my wine.
You're not enjoying your wine. Don't even pretend I'll half a sip now. He doesn't even drink the bottle.
No. It's a lot of the stuff we do. I don't know whether we make a difference. I mean, on Tuesday, Monday, you have people like sitting and in the middle of the road trying to block the street in the city, and They're apparently doing it big today because today it's a legal protest that they're allowed to do. It's not going to do anything. If anything, it's going to piss people off. It pisses people off. Your cause is not going to be there. Oh yeah, well, you're going to be noticed. No, you're going to be noticed in a negative way. You know,
people struggling to go to work to pay $9 for a lettuce, and there's these idiots sitting across the road trying to save a koala, stopping people going to work so they can pay $9 for a lettuce. They haven't thought it out very well.
Yeah.
And my message is that to those guys who are really thinking that they're making an impact, really, I think you're making zero impact. All right, zero. So if you want to do something, just find a way to do it in such a way it doesn't disturb the innocent. Right? You want to go and do that with the politicians, take it there. Do it in such a way that people would want to be behind you. Don't do it in such a way that people are angry and sit there and say, you know what, you can go and get lost. And I think that they've done it. They've done it wrong.
Very good.
You know, it's a bit like even the teachers, you know, do that when it doesn't matter. So, for example, next week, you've got a week off because all the kids are having off. Then all of you should all go down to Canberra and walk. But you won't do it next week because next week you guys are on holiday with your kids.
Exactly.
You know, so you're disrupting the parents and thinking that the parents going to say something to put it. No, we don't care. We're going to probably be thinking you should never do that to innocent people.
Yeah.
Very good. For a bloke who didn't care, doesn't care, you've given it some thought, mate.
Well, I don't care because I don't think it make a difference, all those things that we talk about anyway.
We can talk about it. All right. Topic this week.
Yeah.
Seeing as Thomas doesn't care, try and care about this one, mate.
Yeah. Okay.
Is comparison a thief of joy? So there's a saying that's been attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, Mark Twain, and about 165 other people from what I could find, and no one knows who really said it, but is that comparison is the thief of joy. So interesting statement, opens up a lot of doors. Let's walk through some of them and see where we end up.
Well, why don't you start, man?
Okay. Well, one, on face value, I mean, we're taught don't compare yourself to others and don't worry about what you see on social media, and comparing yourself to others is going to get you nowhere. You've got to worry about you and only you. So on face value, that would suggest that comparison would be the thief of joy. However, I completely disagree. Comparison does not steal any joy. It's what you tell yourself after you make that comparison, the story you tell, in Thomas's words, the interpretation, the saying I keep coming back to is E plus R equals O. It's comparing yourself to something or somebody is an event or an action. What happens from that is completely on you, and that determines whether it steals your joy or not. So no, comparison is not the thief of joy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Interesting, Cam.
So what did you think, Chris?
I actually agree with Cam for a change.
Yeah.
Comparison's the act in which we undertake, but I think it's envy and ego that are the thieves of joy. I think those two feelings that we have often are they're the two things that will steal our joy. And then we can go dissect those later on, but I think just the comparison is an act. And there are benefits out of comparing yourself. There's no question. But it doesn't have to be out to others. It can be comparing yourself to who you were last week, last year, who you want to be. You can compare your waistline to where it was and where it should be, your health, your relationships. It's comparing a lot of things. But it's the want or the lack of satisfaction that you have, the lack of happiness that you have, maybe, or the fact that you are happy with something on that comparison. So there's so many avenues you can go down with that sort of saying. But I don't think the comparison itself is the thief of joy. I think it's the outcome at the end of the comparison, which is.
We're going back into semantic stuff now. I mean, it's if you compare, there's going to be an end product, Right? So
But it's the feeling at the end, which is the thief of joy.
It's not the feeling at the end that's the thief of joy. It's how you analyze the comparison.
Yeah, but
That provides the outcome.
But at the end of that, analyzing that event, you'll have a feeling of whether you're happy with it or not happy with it.
The act of comparing on its own is not a.
Why don't we go back and do what we've been doing for the last few weeks, and let's define comparison. I think that's a good place to start. Then we don't end up going all sorts of directions. So did anybody find any good definitions of comparison?
No, thanks for volunteering, Louise.
Okay, lovely. Well, so comparison is the crush of conformity from one side and competition from the other. It's trying to simultaneously fit in and stand out at the same time. So, and
is that what you believe in? Is it Cambridge?
No, it's not Cambridge. It's Brene Brown.
Because I love the definition. I thought, wow, that is nice.
I love it too.
Oh, wow.
I love it too. And as you guys know full well that I'm a big Brene Brown follower, and I really get into her stuff because I can really relate.
No.
Yeah,
Really?
hold on. You're going too fast. Can you just backtrack? So comparison is two things. What is it?
So comparison is the crush of conformity from one side, and the competition from the other.
Yes.
It's trying to simultaneously fit in and stand out at the same time.
How can that possibly be the definition of comparison? We're sitting here comparing wines. That's not the crush of conformity versus the blah, blah, blah of the other.
Competition from the other side.
What's the crush of conformity?
Well,
in comparing wines.
yeah. Okay. It's talking in general terms. It's not like, okay, comparing wines is a little thing.
No, but Louise, I don't think that he got your definition, the definition you're reading right. So can you reread that again, please?
So comparison is the crush of conformity from one side and competition from the other. It's trying to simultaneously fit in and stand out. That's
amazing, isn't it? So you have two things that's fighting at the same time, right? So you're pulling on both sides when you're doing that comparison. Yeah.
So you're trying not to conform with the mass, but at the same time, you're trying to compete with the mass. So you're trying to fit in but stand out at the same time. And it's almost impossible, you know, but like I with what you guys said, you guys disagree that comparison is a thief of joy. I think the problem is, and it's that old saying, the grass is always greener. It's really, the grass may appear greener, but at the end of the day, it's all perspective. And I think what the problem is when it comes to comparison is sometimes we compare our behind the scenes to other people's highlights. And that's obviously a dangerous place to be or start. I think we compare ourselves more when we don't know what we stand for as an individual as well. When we know what we stand for, we don't have time to compare. And I think that's a big driver of comparison. One of Brene's things is that comparison in her research is actually not really an emotion. It drives and it unveils a lot of other emotions within us, such as admiration, reverence, envy, jealousy, resentment, Schadenfreude, which we've talked about before. It drives all these other emotions in us. So when we actually are comparing ourselves to others, parents, relationships, finances, houses, whatever it is, it actually, the comparison itself is not an emotion, but it's the emotions that it triggers within us that then creates the comparison. Yeah. The other thing too is, in her research and some others that I've found, is you've actually got upward comparison and downward comparison. And so when you're comparing yourself in an upward comparison, you're basically comparing yourself to people who you believe are or perceive to be better than you, better off than you, doing better than you, wealthier, smarter, etc. When you're comparing in a downward comparison, you're actually comparing yourselves to others who perhaps may be worse off, not as successful, wealthy, intelligent, etc. So whilst I don't think I think comparison can completely steal our joy in some circumstances. I think in other circumstances, if we're comparing in a downward situation, it actually is a way in which we can reset our perspectives to say, actually, you know what, I have come pretty far, or I have done pretty well, etc. So yeah,
Wouldn't that be the story you're telling yourself after you've done the comparison? Making Chris and I right?
No, it's not about Chris and you, right? I think that Louise is making great sense, really good stuff. I have to applaud you there, Lou. Yes, Chris said that it was not an emotion. It is a behavior. What comes afterwards is the emotion. I truly believe that in the beginning, if we do it right, compare ourselves is a need. It's in our DNA to compare ourselves. From the moment we were born back in the caves, you know, our mothers already trying to tell the other mothers, hey, my son's bigger, runs faster than you, he catch bigger animal. I mean, it's in the DNA. But the problem is what you just really brought up. It's, are we doing it downward or are we doing it upward? And because there are people who continuously picking on people who are smaller than them and go at them to feel great. Therefore, they try to build that joy. I get that. So they try to get to that emotion. And then there are people who, no matter how well they do in life, they constantly compare themselves to people who are doing better, and there's no chance for them to feel any joy. And in that respect, because they pick the wrong way of doing comparison, they are really creating negative impacts. And yes, in that respect, Cam, you know, yeah, it's the way you think. But it's not that easy. Let me give you an example. Fashion tells us how we should wear certain things. Fashion tells us 30 years ago, your tie should be large. Now fashion's telling us if you have a large tie, just laugh, right? Your tie should be a skinny one. And so what happened is that even the people who say they're not fashionable, they somehow have to. And you don't even have to go further than what the car industry is doing, or what the companies such as Apple's doing. Every 4 years, they change a model. And it's almost, you know, it's almost trying to induce people to compare in a downward way.
Now, let's use the big tie. Do we still see people wearing the big tie though? Without a care in the world? Well, you do. You still see people wearing clothes from the 80s without a care in the world. So is the comparison the problem, or the self-esteem that people have got that are doing the comparing? The comparison is 100% a necessity. If I want to look at where I'm at and where I want to get to, I find someone, and we've given advice on this podcast before, so I'll find someone who's done it and copy what they do, compare where they're at, work out how they got there, and then try and do the same. Now, if you decide to look at, and I've got a bunch of examples we can go through, but if you decide to look at that in a negative way, oh, well, they've got 63,000 officers and I can never be that. That's not the comparison's fault. That's me talking crap to myself.
No, that is comparison. That is the act of comparing. That is.
Yeah, no, it is. No, but there's nothing wrong with comparing. What's talking shit to myself afterwards? There's something wrong with that, right?
No, but this is why we're talking about this. It is always about the talking stuff. When we compare,
it's not the comparison. That's the problem.
See, the comparison in itself.
Like, I think you're not getting it, mate. I think that the act of compare is already a subjective analysis that you do inside. I think that's the one that we're talking about, right?
And more often.
So it is that act of comparison that we're talking about. For sure, it is not a robot comparing you and I. By the way, it's the comparison we're talking about is always an act that we human beings do about things that is around us compared to us.
Exactly. And as well as what Brene Brown has said is more often than not, the social comparison that we do falls out of our own awareness. So unfortunately, half the time we don't even know that we're doing it. And the sad
I don't need Brene Brown to know that. I mean, we all do that all the time, right? We do it all the time. This is why we look at the way we look when we want to go out on a date. or we're on a dating scene. That's what we try and we to compare ourselves. We compare ourselves with what it looks like, and this is why fashion is making so much money, because it says this is how it should be, and then this is the body you should look at. And when you're looking at the person, and right now, Top Gun, the movie is coming back, Top Gun Maverick, there's going to be a lot of guys with Ray-Bans pilots. That's how it's going to be.
And it's nature.
I don't disagree with any of that, mate. That happens.
And so people feel when they do that,
Doesn't
they feel more joy if they can compare themselves in a, in a positive way. So comparison.
That's stealing their joy. No.
That's what we're saying, is that comparison always leads to a feeling. It always leads, the conclusion is always led to a feeling.
Absolutely.
The only problem is, look, even though the banks compare us to their data all the time. If people going for a loan, though, you put all the data in, the bank's comparing you compared to everyone else they've put a loan to, rating your risk factor, and will give you or not give you a loan. So there's comparisons everywhere in the world. But what I think that we're talking about fashion, the majority of people want to conform to society. So they don't want to be compared. They don't want to stand out.
Let's try and move on. But when does comparison give us joy?
I think going back to what I said earlier about sometimes when you're looking at comparison in the downward way, where you're actually using it as a perspective, a way to set perspectives, when you actually can recognize that you are perhaps achieved something in life, or you're doing better than you thought you did, or you recognize how far you've come from a certain point to now, and looking back, like you can, like, for example, if we get a new recruit and you look at the everyday life that they go through and the challenges that they meet, and sometimes you think, you forget what it's like to be there, and you forget how hard it is sometimes, and you remember the days when you were that new recruit and you sat there and you thought, geez, is this possible? Can I do this? But then you have a moment where you look back and you compare and you think, wow, I was that new recruit that time, and look how far I've come. So when you're comparing in that way, I think it's a way in which you reset perspectives, and it can be very.
Is it a downward view, or is it a perspective view?
An interpretation of the action to steal your own circle off your tail. Where does comparison fit into your triangle, mate? Action, result, interpretation.
No, that's not comparison, man. It has nothing to do with.
No, where does the act of comparing?
No, it is when you look at that wheel and then you go, that's not the wheel I want. I prefer Chris's wheel. I
think you're throwing off, mate. Going and comparing.
So I think we get this. We get this, and let's put this. That's all right. You're right. The comparison does that. And it does bring you joy. Perfect, Cam, no problem. I'm now moving on to how can we get joy out of that, Cam? Tell me.
Well, there's two ways. It's based on your mindset. So in Lou's example, for every new recruit that comes in and thinks I can do this, they look up to somebody in the office who's been there and done it and says, that's where I want to be. Here's where I am now. That's where that guy is, or girl. That's where I want to be. Positive comparison. For every one of those recruits, there's someone that goes in there and thinks, well, how come I'm not there already? And how come they don't have to do as many calls? And oh, I could never do that. And shit, I'm never going to make, a $300,000 quarter. Negative comparison.
No, I think that you're talking about too many things at the same time. I'm talking about, all right, let's have a look at your interpretation of comparison brings joy. So I just asked you to give me three.
I didn't say it brings joy. I said it can. I said depending on your interpretation. I never said comparison brings joy. Comparison can bring joy if you use it the right way.
Okay, so let's have a look at how do we use it in the right way to bring joy, because I think this will be helpful, right? So people can take that and go, all right, I can apply that and create joy.
If you compare yourself to something that's legitimate. So let's cross a few things off the list. A chick that's on Instagram that you want to look like, that's used 15 filters to get there, probably not a legitimate thing to aspire to. But if we're talking about real comparison and legitimate comparison, if someone's doing better than you in life and you look at that the right way and say, shit, I wouldn't mind being there one day. Now let's work backwards from there. How did they get there and what can I do in my life to implement that? That's using comparison for joy.
Okay. All right.
That's the interpretation of what you've just seen. But too many people go, what? Not enough people. A lot of people go, I could never have that. But even worse, a lot of people resent that person for having that life, right? Because that's the easy option. All people who are rich are, but geez, it's really hard not to swear on it. I can't even explain this without.
Yeah, no, you're mixing a few things here. So, but I'm still trying to find how do we compare in such a way that brings joy to us, Chris?
So I think intelligent comparison can be your drive and the ambition to achieve what you want to achieve. But by the same token, you've got to have the understanding. You've got to be happy with what you're like at the moment. Doesn't mean you don't have to be happy now. Enjoy what you've got now. But you can use that comparison to drive yourself to achieve what you want to achieve. And like Cam was saying about, you see someone looks a certain way and you envy that. Okay, you want to look like that? Work towards it. Be happy with who you are at the moment. There's only one you, and thank God for that, because the world would be boring if we were all the same, right? So we're always going to be comparing everything all the time. It's a choice. It's a choice to be happy at that time. So I think comparison. Also, you can use comparison to see where you were 5 years ago to see where you are today.
Yeah, that's what Louise brought up earlier. Yeah.
Yep. I think there's a comparison you can use the same with a lot of sort of points in a business, in a relationship, in a community, in a country. But unfortunately, some of those you can't control, and they may be negative. But again, it's your perspective and your ability to keep that joy within yourself.
Yeah.
You can interpret two sets of figures from a business year on year, and you might make more money one year and less money the year after. Now, you can go, oh, we've made less money, the whole world's crap and everything's coming to an end. Or you can go, right, what did we do in 2021 that we're not doing in 2022? That's not stealing joy. Right? The point wasn't that comparison has to add joy. It was that comparison steals your joy. That's some... If you interpret it,
it can steal your joy. It can steal your joy, and we're going to talk about all this. I think that for me, a comparison. First of all, it is required. I said it at the beginning, but it's also good as long as it drives us to improve. The minute it drives us to experience negative emotion, we need to stop. So, and it's different for each person. I mean, some people are so sensitive that a tiny bit of difference that they see between themselves and the rest of the world can send them depressed. They should stop that comparison. Some people can just go, 2,000 miles with like people criticizing them while they're comparing themselves to them. They should keep on going, because if that motivates them to continue to improve, why not? So I think in that respect, the comparison is individually based. It's each individual has got its own threshold.
Absolutely. And can I just say something, Cam?
Yeah.
I think the thing is exactly what Thomas is saying. How do we find joy when? I think the first thing is we need to recognize when we are comparing ourselves. That's probably the most important thing, because a lot of the time, as the research says, a lot of the time we don't even realize we're doing it. It's beyond our own awareness a lot of the time. The places that we go when we do compare ourselves, as obviously was the jealousy, resentment, envy, etc. I think if we can be aware of those emotions, and one of the things that in the research that I found is, while resentment is an identifying emotion, you can normally recognize it within yourself by a familiar thought pattern that you might have. And I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we've thought, and not necessarily now because we're older and wiser, but what mean or critical thing am I rehearsing saying to this person when you've been in a situation? And I think if we recognize when we are about to compare ourselves, I think that's where, or compare ourselves and others, etc. We've got to be aware of that. But I think it all, for me, in how I understand it and interpret it, is it boils down to our perception at most of the time, and how we perceive it to be in our own eyes. but I don't.
But it is always, comparison is what we said at the beginning, Lou. It's a subjective thing.
Yes.
There is, you know, we are human beings. There's no such thing as a objective comparison. If you take 2 bottles of wine, you can. If you
Yes.
take 2 tables, you can look at the dimension and you can compare them,
Yes.
right? But any human comparison is always going to be subjective. So we know it is about how we go through the process. So
Yes.
let's look at how do we then have comparison as a thief of joy?
When it's perceived, I keep coming back to the same answer. It's a thief of joy when you perceive things in the wrong way, or you tell yourself stories that aren't necessarily true.
You're not,
Now,
helping,
let's look.
you're not helping any listener with that kind of line, man. Obviously,
It's not lying.
what you're saying is a universal truth, but
Google. So you Google.
okay,
you
I give you one, and then
you asked a question. Let me finish. Right. You Google comparisons of thief of joy, and the first 15 things are people like Brene Brown and the like saying, don't compare yourself to people, don't compare yourself to people, it's wrong to compare yourself to people. We've just sort of agreed that it's an innate human behavior. You are going to compare yourself to people, right? So there's a difference between someone who compares himself to a person and gets excited and someone who compares himself to someone and gets depressed, right? We can look at it in the home. So let's look at areas where the perception is all wrong. Husband and wives compare all the time, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, ends up in a negative way. Husband, general point of view, wife sits at home all day and does nothing, right? Looks after the kids and cooks dinner, but I bring home the bacon, so I'm more important. Wife, husband does nothing to help around the house, doesn't help me with the kids, doesn't cook dinner, doesn't do anything to help. Both very negative perceptions on comparing. One, you shouldn't be comparing husband and wives to each other because it's meant to be a team. But the comparison is always there. It's what we do with it. Yes?
So the first thing I think we're looking for is to tell people, show gratitude. Simple. The first thing to avoid the negative comparison is to show gratitude to the others.
But first, we're talking about how can comparison be negative?
Yeah.
I get it. Cam has got that. For me, I'm more specific. So I said at the beginning, if you compare yourself to someone and it helps you to improve, which I have done many times in my life, I would look at Tony Robbins and I go, what is it he's doing very well? And I go, I'll try and do that. And as long as it's motivating me to do it right, I'm fine. The minute that I wake up every single day and I feel like killing myself, that's the time then maybe I should stop. I looked at Bruce Lee, what he was doing in his younger days, and suddenly I went to Kung Fu classes, and on the way to Kung Fu class and back, I still keep my kimono and I would fight with anyone in the street that would laugh at me. So, I mean, that's my way of comparing when I was 17. But I think that one of the ways that I noticed how comparison can really bring me down is when I compare myself to someone too far. So I give you an example in the workplace. We have our team, they running all right, and then suddenly we have a newcomer, and his skill is way out there. There's a huge gap. It's like there's an interstellar gap between our team and that person. And because the gap is so big, if you are this person who's got just 1 year under your belt, and you try to just follow this guy and compare yourself that you should be high because you've been in the office for a year and you're not at his level, that is stupid, because the gap is so large that comparison can only lead you to feeling negative. So at that point in time, you should stop doing that. So comparing yourself to someone whose skill is way above you will always lead to depression, anxiety, anything negative.
Yeah.
I agree, TL, except for can that still be spun in a positive light? Can a new recruit look at someone who's 5 years in, 10 years in and say, I'm not there yet, but let's follow the steps to get there? Is that a way they can compare that?
It is possible. So you're talking about solution already. It is possible, Ken, for me, by cutting not by looking at where that person is, but by cutting the gap into smaller chunk.
the journey, right?
And then setting yourself right. By this time, I should be here. Right? If I keep on comparing myself, and by that time I will be here. And at some stage I do catch up. So I think that by chunking down the need to get there today, which by the way this generation likes because they want it now, and that's the problem too, right? And so for me, the need to compare, people don't get it sometimes that a Warren Buffett is a Warren Buffett because of the 35 years of what he's been doing. People go, I've just read his book, I've just read other people's book, I want to be rich as him now. And that's the problem, is comparison takes time. Comparison is not an instant thing. And the minute that you let go of that, then maybe you have a chance.
So in reverse, sorry, Lou, you go. You've been trying to spit. Okay.
I was just going to say, like similar to
me.
When we're trying to compare ourselves to others that are too far, I think the other important thing is as well is we've got to decide and define what success and happiness means to us, because, and across all spectrums, not just our physical, mental, financial, relationship, whatever. If we don't find and define what success and happiness means to us, then by default, we're only going to be comparing ourselves always to what we think it means to everybody else. So we've got to first know, like, happiness and success for some person or a person is going to be a lot different to somebody else. So we've got to find what we define our own success and happiness to be and set the bar there. Otherwise, we're going to be trying to reach somebody else's bar that is way above or way further or whatever, living a totally different life. I think the other thing is we also have to discover what our own strengths are. And we talked about this on Tuesday, discovering what our own strengths are as well. Because if we're always comparing, when we compare with others, usually what we're doing is we're always comparing our weaknesses to their strengths. And we do that without much awareness. We look at others and go, wow, that's fantastic and they're doing amazing. But when we're doing the comparison, we're comparing our own weaknesses to what may be their strengths. So we've also got to be aware of that as well.
In the workplace, so people looking up a problem, but this is a trap I've fallen into in the past. Leaders comparing what life is like now or work is like now to what work is like when they started. That's, we're talking about ways we compare in a negative way and how it becomes a downfall. When I started, I used to do X, Y, and Z, so they should have to. Or on a personal thing, one of the problems I have is putting my standards onto other people. If I can understand that, why can't they?
Yeah.
Very negative ways of using comparison, yes?
Yeah, of course.
No, TL doesn't agree.
No, I'm trying to just compute what you just said, because you said 2 or 3 things at the same time.
So, leader, we're in a new age. We just talked about the census, right? So, millennials versus boomers, and work life is always evolving. So, when I started real estate, I got destroyed once by my leader for going home on 148 calls at 8:28 at night because I didn't do 150 calls. Got absolutely destroyed. So the tendency when I opened my office was, if people weren't doing their numbers, doing 150 calls a day, was to compare what happened to me and put that on them. Not very conducive to building a team, yes?
No.
The other thing that I was saying, I know there's 2 or 3 things. So that's number 1 example. Number 2 example is I can do this, so why can't they?
Yeah.
It's the recruit who doesn't understand that they can't do what a 5-year veteran can do versus the 5-year veteran not understanding that a new recruit can't do what they do for the same reason. The same example works in reverse. And a lot of bosses fall into that trap.
Yeah, because they lazy, mate. They're ignorant. They're not putting time into studying.
But that then steals their joy, right?
Because if they did study, they would know that, for example, employees are nothing different to children, right? Someone's got four children. Let's say someone's got 4 boys, to make it easy. 4 boys, it's easy to say, well, they're boys, so there's no girls there, they're boys. all four boys should really grow the same way. It's not true. One may be highly sensitive. The other one might have zero empathy. The other one had to become so tough because he sees the elder brother being bashed by the father because he's weak. So he's going, well, now I'm going to pretend I'm strong. And then he finds out it works and he becomes a bully. He bullies other people. So how can I compare my four kids? They are already different. So let's move these four children now and put four employees. How could I compare them? It's not possible. I think in the leadership position, what leaders should really do is to study the art of people. Your job is to find out first where each people are, what makes them tick, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and then you guide them to the end goal with their strength, not with your strength. Because if they were built like you with your strength, they're probably running a show like you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wouldn't the treating them all the same and thinking they're all the same be a lack of comparison? I think you do need to put more time into comparing people and working out. I think the working out of each other's strengths and weaknesses and acting accordingly is a comparison. Yes.
No, this is
not
why
comparing them to yourself. The negative I was saying was comparing them to yourself is not the way to go.
That absolutely, it is. It's never the way to go.
Comparing to each other.
You don't compare to each other. Everyone's different. This is why one of my favorite rewards in my business is anyone who does 10 or 20% more than what they did on average, I reward them. Because that means that the guy who's right at the top, he's a top gun, but he's this quarter gone 10% above what he's done average, he gets rewarded. The guy who's at the bottom, he's zero in the company, he's just arrived first quarter, but he's now second quarter, he's done 10% better than, I clap him the same. Isn't the gap the same gap? But yet many organizations, what do we do? Sorry, you're still too far from that number. So I'll reward you who've been around me for 10 years and you who have done a 20% gap, 30% gap, sorry, get better. It's wrong comparison.
So do award ceremonies in general then breed negative comparison?
Right, I didn't hear.
Do award ceremonies and the like then breed a negative comparison?
It's all in the eye of
There's always a top. There's always someone at the top.
yeah. It's all the interpretation, as you said, Cam. It's all in the interpretation of the person who's doing the comparison.
Isn't that why they invented participation awards, to try and stop everyone wins a prize? It stops the comparison.
No, I don't think it's
not the same. The participation award is based on the fact that you're there. The participation award
is, but they give everyone a ribbon, so no kid goes back to school.
No, because in my style of award or reward, not everyone wins. If you only gave me 5% better than your average, I'm not going to applaud that. But gee, I love the David in that David and Goliath battle. I love that David, that small guy that goes out there and does more. So I think that's where leaders can bring happiness and a lot of joy to their business by bringing the comparison from self to self, and which goes back to what Lou said at the beginning. I think what we need to do is to teach people, compare yourself to who you were a year ago.
Exactly. 100%.
And if you can bring that comparison back to that inward, so not outward, inward, but from a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years, you develop so much joy.
Yeah. And the sad thing in exactly that, we should compare ourselves only to ourselves and who we were yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. But I think the sad thing is a lot of us, and especially the younger generation growing up, they've been conditioned to base their self-worth on how others see them, not on how they see themselves. And that's a real bloody shame.
Yeah.
The back half of your statement made all the sense in the world. The first half where you said we should only compare ourselves to ourselves, we've just spent quite a bit of time proving it or suggesting that you can't just compare yourself to yourself. We innately are always comparing ourselves to others. So
Yeah,
I saw a clip on Instagram earlier today, and it was a woman. Gary Vee posts a lot. He's prolific, but the clip was a woman stopping him in the shopping centre and saying, "I'm worried about my child online. How do I protect my child online?" And Gary Vee's response was, "Well, there's two options. One, you can take her offline, and that way it never becomes a problem, or you can make sure she's got the self-esteem and the confidence to not let anything that happens online affect her." So we can't, and that might be a pipe dream. It's all horseshit. But my point is, I'm not saying he's right, but we're always going to compare ourselves to others regardless. So you need to have the self-confidence and the self-belief and the self-esteem to not let it affect you negatively.
Yeah.
Because to say don't compare yourself to others is just as naive as saying, well, protect your kids by making sure they're self-esteem.
Yeah.
One of the things I wrote down, one of the questions I wrote down was, this is all right for adults. This is okay. All the stuff we're talking about, don't do this and do this and don't do this and do this. How do we help our 10-year-olds compare themselves positively or compare positively versus in the negative? How is that possible?
Okay. Well, because
I've got no answer.
Chris, you're going to say, I know you have.
No, I was going to say,
you just
Einstein had a saying that
you've given me the answer, man.
Einstein had a saying that if you compare a fish's ability to climb a tree, the fish will always think it's stupid. So we were saying it before that we have to work on our children's strengths.
Yes.
And tell them it's okay to be different. But if you want to be like that, you have to work on it.
Yep.
And understand it's okay not to be there.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris.
I've got two
Tell your
recruits
kid
in the
it's
office.
okay to be different, mate. Tell your kid it's okay to be different. It's words. How do we show our kids it's okay to be different? How do we give
By living the example,
strength?
mate. By living the example, being comfortable with who you are. But words are words, mate. But words are more. Kids are too busy watching what you do than listen what you say, right? But by the same token, to have that connection with your kid, the one-on-one bond, that when they, you pick them up and you go, "What's wrong?" They actually tell you. It's like a staff member. You see a staff member and they've done something really well. So, applaud them. Give them the kudos.
It's a pipe dream, Chris? Do you think it's a pipe dream?
No, I don't think it's a pipe dream. I really don't.
I'm going to ask you another question. I'm not having a shot. I'm asking a question.
Let me finish talking. I'll tell you why it's not a pipe dream. Why I think it's not a pipe dream. Because it's not a temporary solution. This is an everyday thing. It's not something that you do turn on and off. It's something that you live.
Right. So,
and if you want your kids to be that, I know I've got work to do with my kids. I've got work to do myself. But to have that, it's an everyday bloody thing.
But we've spoken before, Chris, about environment will always overcome will. So if we are around our kids less than their schoolmates, less than the internet, less than their video games, which in most instances we are, how can you possibly prepare in your short time your kid to handle the other 16 hours a day where they're surrounded by the rest of it that we're worried?
So from what I understand, the formative years of most kids, from the age, I believe, of about 18 months to about 4.5, 5 years of age. And then it's very important from the ages of 9 to about 12 or 13. And then a little bit later in life, they start to come back to the nest, and because they start to see mum and dad aren't as stupid as they thought, right? So to be aware of that to start with, number one. Number two, don't be so judgmental that when they bring you an issue that's come up, whatever it may be, or they've got a question that may be outside the norm of what we're used to, don't react like a pork chop. Is it a hope? Absolutely. But we've got to be able to be there and remind the kids that we're there. Show the kids that we're there.
They spend all day wanting to be in the cool group, brother. All kids.
You know, you say environment overpowers will. That's only to a certain point, I think, mate. Because at the end of the day, sometimes wills are very strong to say, you know what, I don't like this environment. I'm changing my environment.
And I think like the bad news is whether we like it or not. I think our hard wiring defaults us to comparison whether we like it or not. Comparison seems to be something that happens to us rather than a choice. The thing what we have to do is when it happens to us, we need to be aware of that and realize that when it's happening, when we're finding ourselves comparing ourselves to others and we trigger these emotions of jealousy, envy, admiration.
How can you expect a 10-year-old to do that, Luke? What you just said was the first thing I was saying. How can a 10-year-old do that?
Cam, it's baby steps, and like I love how I love your questions, but sometimes they're so like this.
Well, that's okay. No, Lou, it's all right. While you're thinking about your answer, Lou, let me answer him so that he's all right. When a child comes home and says, Dad, this is what I've done, and a father says, you should have done that. That simple act forces a child to compare. I compare my action to Dad.
Yeah.
When a father goes and learn to box and goes, you come with me in box, the father is forcing the kid to compare. So in many little acts that we do every single day, mom and dad, we are forcing our kids to compare, either to us, to what we think they should be. And so let's forget about them comparing with somebody else. Comparison can be about concept that we have created they should be. When we tell our kids, you should be like this, we telling them this is an idea and you should be here. And what is worse is that a lot of comparison to me, totally unreasonable. All right, I'm a failure. I don't want my son to fail. So now when I talk to my son, and say, you should study more, you should do this more, and you should really, unbeknownst to him, I'm only forcing him to compare to that standard I have in my head because I love him. I don't want him to fail. So I'm doing it out of love. The intention's right. But because I'm forcing him now to compare his act and actions to a level that I know is going to keep him away from poverty, the poor kid is forced to live a life of comparison. It's a thief of joy. And I think this is why I love what you guys said earlier, where if we sit down and we look at the strength of the kid, and we see the kid, he's got a golden tongue. When he opened his mouth, he can just outsmart anyone with 2 or 3 lines. And we go, you got something nobody else got. Let's see how we can hone that strength. Let's see how we can really get the best out of you. But if we still thinking, no, mate, the power of the punch is the best. My son, my son's going to ever go into a debating thing and learn to speak and kill others with words, from bad to kindness, right? So because we do this, we're stopping their strength and we're forcing them. And it could be their weakness. The kid could be just a thin kid that's going to be a tall kid that's going to be just a great debater or speaker. But we're forcing him to fit our need, what he needs to compare against. Impossible to meet, very, very unhappy.
Just recently, I had an instance when I had a potential recruit that did something that wasn't up to my expectation, wasn't how I would thought. And I compared that to what I would have done, not what she should have done, right? And at that instant, I caught myself and I'm judging her by my set of rules, which is to say my set of rules are correct. My set of rules may well and truly be wrong. I know some of them have been, or I've been mistaken. But so I stopped that comparison very, very quickly. And because I could have completely destroyed someone's future by the wrong comparison.
Yeah.
By the wrong judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can do it with our kids too often. I think, Thomas, what you said is the ability just to listen to them and just to talk them through that sort of how, let them work their own path out. We've got to guide them as well. We're only there.
I just still don't know how that stops. Like I mentioned Instagram before as an unrealistic comparison, right? So the point I'm trying to get is the girl, we all know since Facebook started in 2011 that the rate of suicide went up dramatically, and most dramatically in girls aged 11 to 15. Right?
Yeah.
So how does the girl who is constantly seeing skinny, by other people's definition, beautiful people on Instagram, who looks in the mirror and sees someone who is not that, right? Everything we've said just there doesn't counteract what they're getting force-fed every day of the week, every minute of the day, right? And unfortunately, the cool kids at school, which I mentioned before, latch onto that sort of stuff, and that is why kids are killing themselves, right? And that's like obviously in that instance, comparison is the thief of joy. It's the thief of more than joy. It can be the thief of kids' whole upbringing, right? So how do we make kids that aware? Right, because you can go, you're beautiful, darling, you're beautiful. Don't listen to what they say, you're beautiful. Unfortunately, you're one voice or two voices in a voice of 1,000 that are saying the exact opposite. I'm trying to get to the real.
I wish there was a really, really, really simple, straightforward answer to it, Cam, but I think it's so hard. It's so hardwired in our DNA. When I was doing the research on this topic this week, they actually talked about a study. Lot, and
at least 6 times.
They talk about this study that they did with a couple of apes or monkeys or whatever they were, and it was about 1960 something. And what they did was they were teaching them how to do a certain thing, and they would get rewarded. So it was, touch your head or stand on your toe, whatever, and you get rewarded. So one of them got rewarded with a nice, beautiful cucumber, and it was fantastic, and it was amazing. Until it seen the other monkey who didn't do what he did get given a grape. But that monkey knew that what that grape tasted like was far better than the cucumber. So the monkey went berserk and compared in that moment. And so it's that hardwired in our DNA that I don't think it's that easy just to teach our children. I think people are going to compare, and people will always compare, even unawares. They're going.
How are they going to compare? That's well established. We're going to.
The question was, how do we teach a teenager who's comparing themselves to a size 8 Instagram model, who in real life's probably not, because she's got 20 filters on, she's probably size 12. But I think the only answer is to make our kids realize that the only person they should compare themselves to is who they were and who they are yesterday. And it's hard for a 10-year-old to understand that. My God, I've only just learned that stuff. I was only going to say another word.
You can say shit.
I've only just learnt that stuff now in my 30s,
That's what I'm saying. But the suicide rate of kids went 11 to 15.
I don't think the answer to your question is not.
There is an answer. I'm not asking for an answer, but let's discuss it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is there's nothing that we can say at that point in time when someone's getting bullied in that time frame. All of the effort that you put in prior to that is what's going to help them get through that. The self-esteem coming up to that point is what's going to help them. So the example all the way through their life, from those informative years through the hard times and so forth, allowing them to be able to have the resilience and not have the self-judging and the self-loathing, and understand it's okay to be plump. It's okay to be to eat the wrong things occasionally. All that stuff leading up to that point is the work that you would have had to put in. There's no answer at that point.
The other
So
thing,
that comparison at that point is someone who's got a strong self-esteem, who's self-confident, and who would have peers. You would hope would have peers that would be very similar. So his association would be similar.
Yep.
But there is always going to be those who are outside that model, unfortunately. And those are the ones that are going to be victimized, like we spoke about, by bullies, by those who may need security that they're not getting. But, you know, if the tides were turned, they may take their own lives because they're lacking the self-esteem and so forth. But it's all the work that we're going to put in prior to that point at that question.
Yeah. Exactly, Chris. And knowing what we stand for, when we know what we stand for, we don't default to, you know, look at what other people stand for. We have no room to compare when we know what we stand for. The other thing is helping people and our kids especially define their own definition of success and happiness, because too often people, and we've all been guilty of it, we define success and happiness by how we see other people living and their way of life. And I'll be happy when I get that or have that or compare and are on that level. It's so wrong. I think the other thing is we've also got to always be the student, you know, and teach our children to always be the student, always be learning, not comparing, but learning, and do things. You don't have to do a million amazing things, but if you did a few small things really well, you know, like I think we've got to celebrate the little successes, because it's all just too bloody hard, you know. Like if you had to be everything.
You know what? I think we've got to celebrate the failures as well.
Absolutely.
Teach our kids that it's okay to screw up.
It's good.
Yes.
It's good.
Seriously, for crying out loud, we're talking about success and this. You know, tell the kids it's okay to trip. It's okay to fall. It's okay to cry. It's okay to bleed.
Yep.
Crying out loud. We're all worried about doing things bloody perfect. Screw the world. Do it your way.
Chris, we celebrate you, mate.
Chris, beautiful stuff. But remember, as a father, we must do it first.
And absolutely. I'm failing. I'm failing, but I'm getting better. I'm getting better.
No, it's all about
My wine may not be.
The point he just made wasn't that you are or you aren't. It's that if we do, we've got to be okay with it and celebrate it and not bash ourselves, mate. The point, I was making a joke about celebrating your stuff ups because that's what I'm an arsehole, but that wasn't it. But the point is, as parents and as leaders and as humans, we got to be okay with stuffing up, but visibly okay with it.
Yes.
Otherwise, no one can follow us. How are our teams meant to be okay with stuffing up a listing or stuffing up a sale if every time we do it, we hit the roof and carry on? Right?
Exactly, Ken.
I think, you know, Lou, you said earlier on, oh, sorry, Ken, we finished?
I don't know.
Lou, you said early on, you brought up a word which I actually had written down, that when you have purpose, comparison isn't as strong when you have purpose.
Exactly.
And I think it's when you have purpose is you're okay with failure. You're okay because there's a bigger picture that you're driving towards. And I think the two words that I come up with in the research that I did was, you know,
lots of research going on in this podcast.
I did all of about 5 minutes. So
they're good, man. They're good.
So have purpose and your values. Your own personal values are going to guide your judging, right? Guide your comparisons. If
you believe that,
good,
Chris?
healthy values, sorry, Ken?
You believe that, mate?
I do. I think if you've got good, healthy values and strong purpose, I think your comparison won't be as strong. You won't be comparing yourself. Or if you do, you'll understand, okay, I want the Maserati. But you know what? I need to work towards it. So what are the chunks that I need to do to get there? So I've got a good purpose and I've got good values. It's quite easy for someone to go and do the superficial thing, go get a bank loan, buy what they want, and then just have that look good.
But has that stopped you, and I'm asking you personally now, has that stopped you in the past comparing and getting down about it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it hasn't. I absolutely have compared. Right. But I usually compare myself to myself, not to the majority of the others, of where I would like to be or where I should be.
But that doesn't, you don't.
I compare myself. This is the funny thing. I'll be honestly speaking, I often compare myself not to others, but to where I believe I should be.
Yeah.
And that's the comparison that I have a hard time with, because I know what I'm capable of, but I have blocks that stop me from getting there, which I'm working through. And that's the comparison that I have. And as I was saying, the comparison is all over the place, mate.
I just want to make
comparison's not always with other people.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Chris.
I just want to make sure, the same as Thomas just said, that we're saying what we do or that we're willing to do. And that might sound harsh. And
Sorry, Chris, but when you're comparing yourself to what you should be, that is comparing yourself against somebody else who is an invisible self. So I'm sorry, man. You're lying there.
I'm also 20 kilos lighter. There,
you got me until that one.
Lighter.
You got me until that one. Whether I'm comparing myself to Bruce Lee, who's dead, or I'm comparing myself to what I should be, the two are the same. They don't exist. They don't exist, right? They only exist in my head because I don't even know who Bruce Lee is. I only know Bruce Lee as I imagine he is from what I've read and all that, just as much as I only know who I should be because of who I am, and I'm extrapolating where I am. So when you compare yourself to who you should be, you compare yourself to others.
books, mate, books. We just read, I mean, not just, but we spent a whole year almost talking about the Stoics and comparing ourselves to whether we were Stoic or not.
Mm.
Huh? So,
It's a good saying in the book, man. It's a good saying.
So, stole your
Let
thunder.
us take pleasure in what we have received and make no comparison. No man
you
will
have to
ever be
make
happy,
comparison.
tortured by the greater happiness of others.
We keep going back to, oh.
That's the Stoics.
I've been told once I make a point, I keep going back to the same point, but you people aren't helping me, right? We've agreed that we compare all the time, and that most of the time we're unaware we do it, and then we keep going back to you shouldn't compare. The two can't
coexist. The Stoics are saying don't compare.
Well, they're wrong because you're going to.
But no, we are only discussing that there's a lot of comparison that leads to a deprivation of joy.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So,
and
I would say that a lot of that comparison, when most fathers or mothers are telling their kids what they should do or should be, it's comparison.
Yes.
When a leader sits down and say, well, you should really be at this level by now. Me, when I was in your career, I was there. It's comparison. When you sit down by your desk and you go, man, you know, when I look at my father's life, really, by the way that I've been growing, I should already be there. It's comparison. And most comparison will lead to that. And what we need to do is to stop doing that. However, we have to be very careful because comparison somehow gives us also a bit of that energy to improve.
So when we come out and say my first ever month in real estate, I got 8 listings, thus everybody should be able to get 8 listings in their first month. I believe it should happen. Are we using comparison in a positive or a negative way?
It would be negative if we are doing it with some people whose skill are so far behind us. It would be because they will try to go, oh, it's not for me, I'll leave.
If we're doing it with someone whose skill is almost equal to ours, that's perfect. That gives him a chance to get 9.
Mm.
So I think it's when we fall as leaders or as parents when we fall prey to comparing people as if they're all universal, all the same. Now that's where our problem is. Now let's try and finish this now on this. What about the individual? How can someone who all their life has been comparing now? They buy only shirts because there is a horse on the shirt. If there's no horse, they don't buy. They do their best to send their kids to private school because private school is it. They do their best to buy a nice house because if you are successful, you should have a nice house. How do they find a bit of joy anyway? Because I think they're improving, but how do they find a bit of joy? I think personally, I give you my answer, so I'm going to steal yours. But Chris, you said at the beginning, for me, it's gratitude.
Mm.
Every single day, you really look at what you have and say, man, I can't believe that a young kid that I was coming over here with no English has done this.
Mm.
that single gratitude will set you into a different level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, suddenly you compare yourself, and the best thing to do when you compare yourself is compare yourself with the guy that used to be 5-year-old, because the skill that you have is so much bigger and so much better, right? So I think that when you said gratitude, you said it in one word and then you moved on. I think gratitude is the biggest thing that human beings should do every single day. We're not grateful for the spouse we have. We're not even grateful for the kids we have. Seriously, if they were not in our life, how would we feel? We not, but all we look at is how these bloody kids just leave their rooms with the light on. You know, how they drink our wine.
Push-ups in my hands, mate.
So I think we have all of that stuff.
Yeah.
How about you, Ken?
No, I think that's a beautiful answer, and it's something I've experienced myself recently. So until I realised where I'd come from and where I am now, I couldn't accept that I was any of that. So I can't actually better that answer, mate. It's a very confronting thing. And now I've never bought a shirt with a horse on it because I've always had people buy them for me because they don't think I dress well enough, Hoang. So thank you for that.
No, that's not true.
Not that I'm comparing you guys are clearly comparing me to someone who dresses better, so that's all right. But when you get shirts and deodorant every birthday up until you're 40 or cologne, you know what's being compared to, right? So
that's not true. I keep on telling my wife, don't buy him a shirt with a horse. It will make the horse look bad. So I keep on telling my wife not to do it.
It's a bit of a mate. I tried to go horse riding at Glenworth Valley, and I'm too heavy at the moment to even ride a horse. So wearing a shirt with one is
the horse is still having physio.
I just got a little bit water in my eye again because it's something that I've been through. The minute I turned 40, something happened. Crystal actually sat up with me for a change on my 40th birthday, and at midnight I burst into tears. And she's like, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't speak, and I sat on the couch and I was sobbing like a 3-year-old. And it was a realization that the part of me was fighting with you're 40. The first part of me was fighting with you've just turned 40 and you've done nothing. You're a nobody. And then there was a realization that 6 years ago you couldn't get a SIM card from Optus, mate, so you might have done all right. And that just increased the gratitude for all of it. We joke about I've bought a $7 million house with no air conditioning, but I'll sit in the back room here and go, it's 8 with inflation. And I sit here now, and now I sit here and go, how effing good is this, right? And that's something I couldn't do. I've had 6 months of absolutely fighting the shit out of myself, and there's this huge battle going on, and it's gratitude. It's telling yourself that you've earned it for one, and being grateful that you got there for two, and then realizing that, hey man, you're doing all right. And that's that. I mean, I've never been big on comparison. I'm not I've never sat there and gone, I want what he's got. All right. My comparison is if there's a leaderboard, I want to be on top of it. That's my comparison that was dangerous in the past. But comparing yourself to yourself, actually understand. A lot of people through false humility won't. Thomas, you mentioned it the other day. People tell you you've changed and people tell you you've grown, and up until recently you wouldn't accept that, right? You just go, oh man, and then you sat down and actually thought about it because there's something inside us that doesn't want to accept the fact that we might actually be getting better at life and not great at life. We're not a lot to. We've still got a long way to go, but the fact that we're getting better, and if we're getting better every day, bit by bit, then that's enough to stop you worrying about the comparison, right? You compare and go, yeah, that guy's got that. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. And as long as you're on your way, you're winning. If you're getting further away from where you want to be, you got a problem. If you're going no closer to where you want to be, then you got a problem. So, yeah, that's me. Sorry.
Nice. I like it. Anyway, shouldn't compare yourself to me, mate. I'm that.
Don't compare
yourself to you. You'll never reach anyway. I'm that
Can play tennis, have hair. I win. I'm comparing down.
You know, I'm that rainbow that never stopped anything.
But it's a thing that
rainbow. We've used the word rainbow to describe.
How about you, Chris? We're gonna allow Louise to close it this week. So go first.
Gratitude, to build on top of your gratitude there, absolutely. Show gratitude. It's formula number one. Number two is what can I say is I heard compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Just be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today, and just keep that going. That's the only thing you got to do. Don't worry about everyone else, because at the end of the day, that compound interest will make you better, and you'll look back and you'll be comparing yourself last year to who you are today, and it'll always be that little bit better. Work on yourself. Don't worry about the others. And show gratitude.
Yeah, look, I think comparison in a nutshell, I think it's something, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong, it's just what I've read this week, but I think part of me believes that I've done some research, and I think part of it is very true, that a lot of the time we do these comparisons without even realizing. But I think the important thing is I don't think necessarily comparison is always a bad thing. I think when we're comparing ourselves sometimes in the downward way is sometimes a good way to reset our own perspectives and actually pat ourselves on the back to go, yes, we've come this far, or we've made it from here to there. Like you said, Cam, from not being able to buy a SIM card to where you are today, like that's just incredible. And to make that comparison, there's nothing wrong with that. We have to be humble and be okay with that to know. And, you know, I think what we need to be, I think it's a healthy thing in some respect as well. We have to teach our children and our staff and everybody else that matters that, you know, what you need to do is really compare yourself to yourself, but really identify first and foremost what your own definition of success and happiness is. Because, you know, if you're always chasing the definition of somebody else's or the world's or social media's or somebody else's, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get there. You know, you have to know what your own strengths are, and only work on that and compare your strengths to someone else's strengths. Another funny thing, and I just want to quickly mention, that I heard it, that I was doing in the research. I think these things come to me, and they come to me in moments, and I confuse myself, and I probably confuse you guys, but I think they're important to mention. Rather than compete, we need to collaborate. So many times we go out.
People are always going to compare themselves to each other.
When you go out there, a lot of the times what creates comparison is when we try and compete. Rather than trying to compete, let's collaborate. So even if it's in our own circle, if it's in our own field, why try and be better? Well, not better than, but why try and outdo somebody in that field? Study somebody who's done it and do it and is doing it and is doing well, and collaborate with them. Don't try and compete, because that's when the
nature of our business, the nature of life, the nature of our business is
survival of the fittest.
I know, but I'm talking on an individual perspective.
No, always try and be the best.
All right, I'm going to close this week, and my closing is this. I was kidding with the gratitude. We have to set the bar for ourselves of what is enough.
Yes.
One of the nicest things that I've read lately is start by deciding how much you'd like to retire on. How much money would you like to retire on each month? Because if you can start from that point, you now travel your own journey. There is no more need to compare, because you got that journey to go. And a lot of people, because they don't have it, they go on the comparison train, and all that they do is more and more. And now they have this, they want more and more. And they start taking advantage of their team. They start taking advantage of people who are around them, because it's not enough for them. And at the end, they just destroy everything they've built. What we need to do is to start by setting what is enough for us, and then work it backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for today, team.
Okay,
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.